Good day, my name is Christelle from Frans de Klerk Independent Technical Analyst. Craig had a very interesting question, and it was, why did the gold price back in September 2011 decline with about $300 within a matter of 3 weeks? There's an interesting relationship between the US dollar and commodity prices, and I think it was good to discuss basically three graphs here. The gold graph, the dollar index, and the rand. Now, there's an inverse relationship between the gold price and the dollar. Why? Remember, when the majority of the commodities are priced in dollars. Let's start there. Gold, oil, platinum, palladium, they are priced in dollars. When the dollar strengthens, the other major currency weakens against the dollar. That means when the dollar strengthened, the other major currencies can buy less commodities, which means there might be a lesser demand for that commodities. If there is a lesser demand for that commodity, the price of that commodity declines. And the inverse relationship applies as well. So if we go back to what the dollar index and the gold did back in the week of the 5th of September, we can see that the gold index hit a high of $1,920, but that week it declined 1.47%. The following week, in the week of the 12th of September, it declined about 2.39%. And then the major correction was in the week of the 19th of September 2011, where the gold price declined 8.6%. Keep in mind, at that time, gold was also, of course, a favorite. Times were uncertain, and the commodity just continued to rise. And that's sometimes when we talk about an asset going into a bubble. And what that means is the price continued to rise, but the underlying fundamentals do not support that rise in the price. Also keep in mind, gold is not an income payer. And what I mean by that is when you have equity as an asset class, it pays dividends and bonds, coupons. And if you have property, rent. Gold is purely a capital appreciation commodity, one, and a safe haven in times of trouble. But normally, gold is a favorite in high inflation environments before 2008 and before stimulus. But when the low wage inflation obviously does not support the higher product inflation, gold sometimes retraces. Also keep in mind, when a commodity is this popular, as soon as it starts to retrace, the margin calls on the traders also get triggered. And that means they have to close their long positions, which means inevitably they have to sell that commodity. Let's have a look at the impact on the dollar index in that same week. We can see that the dollar index strengthened in that week of the 5th of September, 3.26%. The next week, about 0.77, no major change. But that last week, in the 19th of September 2011, the dollar index strengthened 2.48%. What was the impact of the rand on that? In that week of the 5th of September, the rand weakened 3.04%. The week of the 12th of September, it weakened 2.39%. And that last week, it weakened 8.98%. So that is the relationship between the dollar represented on the dollar index and the gold price. And we know that at the moment, the gold is on a new record high, trading there at around $2,030. And the question is, how high can it go? That brings me back to the current rand against the US dollar graph. And we've mentioned before that there is an inverse cup and handle formation. Only when the rand starts to consolidate above 17.53 again can we assume that the momentum to the top can continue. We can then assume again that the weakening trend will escalate. If the rand retraces and comes back to the neckline, waiting there around 16.30, which is also weighting very closely to that 40-week moving average. Below these levels, we can assume that the rand will strengthen further. And we've mentioned before, the first conservative target of the strength in the rand, should it get there, is about 15 rand 15 against the dollar. But above 17.53, the rand can go back to 18.55, 18.80, and again back there around 19.10. Papi wanted us to, the question was, is there any high probability setups for small caps? Papi, the only one I could find was in Bali, and I was particularly looking for something that possibly could imply a Darvas model. And a Darvas model is a long consolidation phase on a small cap share as well as a spike in volume. And we can see for the last couple of weeks, since the 6th of July, there's definitely been a spike in volume on the Mbali graph. Keep in mind, this is a very illiquid share, so it can be difficult to get in and out. But the consolidation phase will be confirmed above 4 cents. And what is the Darvas model? It talks about, it represents the movements of a dancer continuing to practice his move, and then at some stage when he has mastered it, it breaks out and it rallies to higher levels. So since about July 2017 in Bali, I've just been in this long consolidation phase. Let's see that as a false break or a whipsaw. And now, more importantly, that 40-week moving average, waiting there around 3 cents, have changed into the support. So above 4 cents in Bali would be a buy opportunity, but below 2 cents, we will get nervous again, and we can assume that the share might be stuck in this consolidation phase for a little bit longer. Stephen wanted us to look at Sibanye. And Stephen, we can definitely see, it's at a brand new record recent high. These two resistance levels that weighted there around 51 Rand 55 has now changed into a support. So the big question is, how high can it go? So the only thing we can do, and let me just take off this volume, is to maybe use Fibonacci levels and take it back to this low that was around here March 2020 at around 15 Rand 69. And we can see the next Fibonacci level on Sibanye is waiting there around 73 Rand 68. Obviously, it won't just move up in one line, but there will be risings and pullbacks. But this is the first target for Sibanye should the momentum to the top continue. My first sign of warning, and keep in mind, this is weekly graphs, so inevitably this candle has not finished yet. So the first sign of warning will be below last week's 47.77. If the share price retraces back to 47.77 and it starts to change that level into a resistance, we can refer to it as maybe a loss of momentum and then start to see if there is lower highs visible. At the moment, new highs are being made, so we assume that the momentum to the top will continue. Take note, my share is extremely overbought on the stochastic indicator, but that doesn't mean that it can continue to rise. An overbought indicator just highlights the probability that the share might retrace first. But your two moving averages within that stochastic is still, your K line and D line is still pointing upwards, which tells you that the overall momentum to the top on Sibanye is still in place. So keep that 73.46 level as a possible target. I would not chase it at this stage. If you're brave enough, consider a short then below 47 Rand 77. Tracy wanted us to look at British American Tobacco. Tracy, we know the share is oversold. My stochastic is below at 20, and have a look, my two moving averages within my stochastic has broken upwards. But last week's candle is a beautiful inverted hammer. Now, an inverted hammer is a candle that appears at the bottom of a sell-off with a long tail at the top, which tells us that should the next candle be a bullish type of candle, the possible turnaround on British American Tobacco will be on the table. So buy above 603 Rand and 2 cents and use a stop loss of 535 Rand 46. And your first target would be that 40-week moving average, waiting at 627 Rand 27. And then the big test is, can it go back to that high in the week of the 28th of April, waiting at 731 Rand 24. If we go back and we zoom out, we can see that British American Tobacco is coming from a low base. Should this be the turnaround that we're waiting for, we can refer to this graph as having possible higher lows, and that will be seen as very, very positive for British American Tobacco. If that low of 556 starts to change into a resistance again, we can assume that the momentum can continue back to maybe 496 level. But if you want to wait for confirmation, wait for that turnaround candle and then consider a possible buy there above 603 Rand and 2 cents. Please don't forget to send through your requests for next week's show. Have a fantastic week. Take care.